So, Carrie Meyer, so lovely to have you with us today. You are the spouse of Dr. Brad Meyer, and you guys basically are so important in our family's life because you helped when my brother was sick. So, I'll just start it there. And you have Okoboji Wellness. No, I
Yep.
didn't say it correct.
Okoboji Wellness Clinic. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
In Spirit Lake, Iowa. Yep.
Yeah. So you're doing some great work up in northern Iowa. Tell me a little bit about your background and how did you end up with basically a hyperbaric clinic?
Yeah. So my background is actually in physician-patient communication. So that's a kind of a fun fact. I went to the University of Iowa trying to study how physicians communicate with their patients. And so my dream job was to be actually a patient advocate, helping relate between the patient and the physician. And then I ended up marrying a physician. So kind of a fun way that God works in that way.
Now,
Um,
did that help you communicate better with him?
It did, and I constantly analyze, how he's speaking with his patients and getting, eye level and just really, really great listening skills and understanding, taking a good, physical and a history and understanding that as the patient physician relationship and why that's really critical, and as he, went to residency and just his regular private practice, it was really interesting watching how the appointment times in the traditional system that it's a 7-minute appointment and he's like I can't get it done in 7 minutes. He's like it's a disservice to getting to the root cause with patients, and it was very frustrating, which was interesting. How we opened this amazing clinic here in Northwest Iowa is about 4 years ago my husband was fired for without cause, but for prescribing ivermectin really in Northwest Iowa, something that I you know, it was shocking to our family that something that is simple as ivermectin, which now has helped with people understand the efficacy of that in COVID. He walked home and we just said, okay, well, what's the alternative? The alternative is we take our heart and we made something absolutely beautiful. And so for
So
the
let's
last
let's go back to that for a minute.
yeah,
He was literally fired from his job as a hospital doctor for writing a prescription.
yeah. So I will never forget Molly sitting at my kitchen table, and he had written a prescription with informed consent for 2 ICU patients, and the hospital had canceled those two um, orders, which has never happened really in the history of a hospital. And he came home, and those two patients they died. And my husband was sitting, and he was weeping. And he goes, "Carrie, I can't keep doing this." And I said, "I understand." I said, "Well, I'll do whatever I can to support you in this process."
Mhm.
And so we prayed, and we're like, whatever was supposed to happen. And on a Monday morning, they let him go, and he felt like the weight was lifted off of his shoulders, free to be able to, you know, advocate for the patient, give them informed consent, and figure out the new alternative. The last 4 years have been hard. We had to cash out our 401(k) to build this clinic. It's been hard. I was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids, and learn how to be you know, an advocate for the patient, learn how to be a general contractor, you learn how to be a team lead for, practitioners and an incredible healing team. But it's been a gift. We took our hardest date and made an absolute beautiful miracle clinic for people to come and receive hope and healing. And that has been every step along the way has been a learning opportunity for us and for our team. My dad always said to me, "Carrie, is it worth the climb?" Every hard day, go like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. And then we get a little bit higher. And every time it was worth it because we got to see miracle after miracle and getting to see lives that they're so appreciative and the gratitude from our patients. It was worth all the long hours of trying to stand this clinic up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for a little bit of background, I've told the story multiple times, but Nick was sick. This is actually I think it's
Yeah.
exactly how we met. My brother was sick with COVID and we had gone to the ER and they kicked us. He said he wouldn't go in without me. And so he left. We didn't even check in, I don't think. And we got some bottles of oxygen. We drove up to Okoboji and crashed in their lake house.
Yeah.
And the rest was history.
Yeah,
So,
I'll never forget that. I mean, when you came in, he was so sick, and you're like, "Carrie, I need your help." And so, we were just standing up a clinic here in Northwest Iowa, and I'm like, "Okay, well, just come to our lake house. Like, it's a safe environment outside of our clinic." And we brought over our hyperbaric chamber, and it was great because you got to be his sister at that moment, and Dr. Meyer and I got to help, you know, aid him in getting well, and giving him some chromium powder and getting him in that chamber and watching his pulse ox go from, what was it? It was very low. It was like a
78.
78, yeah, and then go up to like 95, 98 within, 4 minutes of being in the hyperbaric chamber, and he just seeing his eyes light up that quickly, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I can breathe." I remember seeing that. Yeah,
Huh.
tears.
Yes. And we ended up bringing that we bought the hyperbaric chamber, we brought it home, and we started treating patients. So it really was the see one, do one, teach one model at play. This is how medicine spreads. How did you guys get into hyperbarics in the first place, though? Because you were already in that environment a little bit prior to your ejection from the system, as I'll call it.
Yeah. So, what was interesting is how we got into the hyperbarics is Brad had a patient up here in Northwest Iowa who knew Dr. Fogarty, and she had COVID long haul. And part of her COVID long haul is she's like, "Hey, Dr. Meyer, would you be open to having a conversation with a physician who knows hyperbarics?" And so we end up getting to know Dr. Fogarty, and we bought a chamber from him to use at our home. So then from there, then we created a clinic. And so, you start one with at your home as a physician, and then he taught us how to do mild hyperbarics. And so it's that's how you spread the good news of with hyperbarics. We've had other practitioners even come to our clinic to say, how do I do this? What does this look like? And so and then how do we get these hyperbarics to, safely into people's homes as well, to having a home unit? For myself, I love having a hyperbaric chamber in my home. I normally crawl in about 6 a.m. and come out about 7:30. And, it's like getting a 4-hour nap before my day. And I can put in a long out day, no inflammation, mental clarity. And what's even just stress, just trying to manage it all. It's been pretty incredible. So,
Yeah. Tell us, you design the chambers. So I recently had a visit up to their office, and hopefully we're going to be selling these with you and getting them into our patients' hands. But you totally redesigned these soft chambers. So tell people a little bit about the difference between a hard chamber and a soft chamber and why you're doing the soft chamber. And then how did you decide to tweak the design?
yep. So the heart chambers, we actually found that there's a couple great really stories about just the air pressure alone with mild hyperbarics. There's a great story about Eden Carlson with between Dr. Paul Harch and Ted Fogarty. There's also some other ones with dementia patients who they just the air pressure alone at 1.3, that actually the low pressure actually was the therapeutic dose for these patients. And what we've actually found is that anywhere between 20 and 40 mild hyperbaric treatments that has done incredible. That low is a really great pressure to have. I had bought in a chamber of another company, and I had a paraplegic in a wheelchair, electric wheelchair, and he couldn't get into the chamber that we were using. So I called the manufacturer and I said, "Hey, listen, we need this. We need this. 10 inches taller, 10 inches deeper." So, because he was in his wheelchair and he would have to go back 45 degrees to be able to get into the chamber. And it was literally um, treating him with COVID. My husband was, and within 10 weeks they had it re-engineered so that Chad Pritz could actually get in his chamber, which is amazing. Got one, and now he's feeling movements, the nerves are healing, and his pain went from a 10 out of 10 down to a 3 out of 10, and that's a win for me. And so really Chad was the inspiration of kind of redesigning these. How do we make them more accessible? How do we add and so working with the manufacturer, trying to make them more patient friendly, having them air conditioning ready, having them with bigger windows. Um, that's been a really amazing process for me over the last 2 years. Getting to do different color designs from like kind of a concierge level from that perspective. That's been a delight.
Yeah. So there's a lot of blah, blah. There's a lot of objections to some patients to their first time. I'm claustrophobic. I can't sit in that chamber. What do you tell them?
Yep. So our chambers, the nice thing is that we have the bigger windows, and it's like flying first class. So when you come to our clinic, you get a pillow and you get a blanket. So you literally are in a reclining chair. It's a delightful experience. It's like we live at a Lake Okoboji. It's kind of the Hamptons of the Midwest, and so I kind of let them know that it's like going into a very fancy fish shack. Although I do get some fishermen up here who are like, "Carrie, where's the walleye?" So but anyhow, it's really a delightful experience. We have air conditioning, so the air is constantly flowing. So you're feeling that air movement, realizing that you're going to be okay. They do have an emergency button that you can get out. That having that quality, that safety feature where you can, adjust the pressure from the inside yourself, and also the fact that you're in a delightful, leather chair. It's like flying first class. And so, at any point, if there's, we do have call buttons for patients that if they're, if they're experiencing any type of issues, they can let our nurses know. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like flying first class, and most people, they sit back, they're more nervous, and then the reality is it comes down. One of the other things that we do with our patients too is we have a PEMF pad that we can get them for 15 minutes. They can sit on it before the treatment, and go in relax mode, and that just kind of calms things down, and just making sure that they're hydrated beforehand. And most people do amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And what do you tell people about? I think you alluded to it, but just to bring it to the surface, how many times do they need to do it? Because we have sometimes patients come in and they think one and done and they're good. And if they didn't feel anything, it's not going to work for them. So, what do you tell people about how often they need to be in there?
Yep. So most patients, it's gonna take, depending on what their ailment is, but it's gonna be, probably anywhere between 20 and 40 hyperbaric. It's a commitment. It's like going to the gym. Are you gonna get svelte in one workout? No, you're gonna you have to put the reps in, and that's what it is. It's
I'm always disappointed when I'm not svelte after one salad and one
I know, right? Yeah, but it's a habit. It's right. It's a habit-based lifestyle, and the reality is that doing that means that you have to put the reps in. That means that you have to have a commitment. And how we do that here at the Okoboji Wellness Clinic is we sell packages, and what the packages does is it helps the patient make the commitment that they are willing to put in the reps, the time to get here. So most patients, Dr. Meyer recommends, 2 to 3 days a week. You want to get there quicker and faster, 4 to 5 days a week. And we have some patients who come here to Northwest Iowa. They stay with us for 2 to 3 weeks, and they get their 40 hyperbaric dives in. And
Mhm.
they're the ones who are seeing results, like diabetic neuropathy. A lot of patients, after about 10, guess what happens? I'll never forget, a patient came out of the chamber and she started weeping. And she goes, Carrie, this is the first time I've been able to feel my feet for the first time in like 25 years. And it took
Mhm.
10. It took 10. Some patient it can be sooner. Some patients it can be longer. One of my favorite stories, Molly, is we had a lady, and she's our kind of our hero for dementia, Jean Benda. She was actually in the nursing home, like in the nursing home, and she desperately wanted to move back to her own home. And after 20 dives, the family's still staying with us in regards to, and we got to 35 dives, and she was actually released from the dementia unit. So we were able to reverse the dementia in that patient, where she was able to, get back home. And I'll never forget. She called us and she goes, Carrie, I have to cancel my appointment. I'm out golfing today. I was like, okay. And she came back in the next day, and she goes, I got a birdie on the golf course. So I mean, what a great story is that, right? So she literally was in the nursing home, got out, is now living at home, and now is getting birdies on the golf course. I mean, it was such a great, but it took 40 hyperbaric dives, and so, but her family was committed to bringing her into the clinic, to getting that help, to having the nursing care within the facility, and letting Dr. Meyer work with, functional medicine. So it's not just the hyperbarics; it's a whole,
Mhm.
looking at your diet, your lifestyle, all of those different tools that we have, and a lot of the things that Brad always says is different tools in the toolbox, just like you have at your clinic. There's different tools that you can use in conjunction with hyperbarics. Hyperbarics is one of those tools, but there are some other things like ozone and other modalities that you have that, can assist the patient in getting well. Yeah.
So, if there's somebody out there that has a family member, though, that they're dealing with dementia and they're looking at the cost of care of that person in a nursing home, this is a drop in the bucket compared to a lifetime of care in the nursing home, isn't it?
Absolutely. I have a loved one who was in the nursing home, and it's $7,000 a month,
Mhm.
versus my grandmother who was in the nursing home, and it was like 3 grand, so it's like double almost for the dementia area, and so yes, it takes a commitment to be able to bring them in here, but then if they get a glimmer of hope, and I think that's what we really strive is hope, healing, and hyperbarics, is that there is hope. There's no guarantee, but for people who want a little bit of hope, with even with the concussion patients, even athletics, we had a patient in here who was a state going into the state championship football, and we did hyperbarics, 10 hyperbaric treatments, and he was back and he made it to the final game,
Mhm.
which is pretty awesome. And but it just takes people willing to put the effort in, the time and the commitment. We have extended hours, 7 a.m. All the way till 5 p.m. and run our last shift. So it's 7 to 7, really here, 12 hours that people have access. And we have 10 hyperbaric chambers here at our clinic, to give people different styles, lay down, sit up, different options so that there's access. And I think, clinics like yours and ours and other hyperbaric and wellness facilities that are, sprung up from kind of the heart of the last 4 years. It's such a gift that we get to see patients heal, and that is a blessing of being able to be in this business.
Yeah. Are you seeing any resistance from patients as they're transitioning from this insurance model system medicine to what you have to offer? Because it is, when we play outside the system, it's a cash fee for those services. Are you seeing any hesitation on that? Are people figuring it out? Tell me how you address that or what you're seeing.
Yeah. So from a cash based system, it was kind of it was a transition for people to say, but I have this insurance, and but this is going to cost me money. But the reality is how much are they actually paying to go to the ER? How much are they paying in their pharmaceutical prices? How much are they, and are they getting results? I think that's really what it comes down to. Are they seeing results in the traditional system? Yes, there is you still have to have insurance for if you have, a broken leg, orthopedics is still needed, different things like that. So yes, you still have to have the insurance for that reason. But in regards to, it's like going to the gym. Do they pay for my gym membership? I wish they did, but they didn't. So you really have to think of this as a wellness facility. It's a wellness club where you are coming here. And you have to put the reps in. And when you want to go for those big wins, sometimes you have to put your money where you want to put the effort. I know that if I'm paying money to go to a hyperbaric or IV vitamin C or different things like that, am I going to make different choices in regards to what am I consuming? What am I being active, right? And so sometimes you have to put a little investment in yourself, and what a great investment that is. And so we always leave it up to the patient. What kind of results do you want to get? How quickly do you want to get them? And you are the greatest asset to your family. And when you really think about that, you are the greatest investment. And so from a financial perspective, we get that it takes money and finances to get here. Do I wish insurance covered it? Absolutely. It'd be easier for the patient. But I will tell you that most patients, by the time they walk through our doors, they want results and they're willing to do whatever it takes. And so from that perspective, getting packages with hyperbarics, IASIS, ozone treatments. We sell the packages because it helps remind the patients that they're in the game, that they're going to put the reps in, and that has been their commitment, right? And so, and then we walk alongside them with that, and it's a whole total body healing. But really, Brad really puts it in the patient's hands to say, what kind of results? What does that look like? And you're the greatest investment. And when people start realizing that it's time to put the oxygen mask on themselves, and that total body healing is available. They just have to receive it. And we have a saying here at Okoboji Wellness Clinic, we say, it's happening. And so then they start coming here. They're like, healing is happening. It's happening. And so then it really, the cost of it goes out the window because reality is, we still have to cover the cost of our nursing team, of all the modalities to stand up a clinic. Like I said, we used our entire life savings to build this facility. And I was grateful. It was just us to manage it. And I was grateful that we were able to do that, but it's been a sacrifice. There's a reason why there's not a lot of doctors, Molly, like yourself and our family, who are willing to go all in, who learn how to understand the business side. When you get, you know, released from the traditional system, let's just say, right? Um, um, you have now become a business owner. You have to now become a practitioner. You have to learn how to do this differently. And this is just part of that transition. Yeah.
Yeah. At those early steps, your marketing, your payroll, your HR, you're the janitor. You're
You're the
doing
janitor. Yeah, I mean, it's all of it, and you know what? I'm grateful for every one of those roles that I learned in the process. Sometimes you have some whammies as a business person to say this isn't working or this is working, or how do we get the commitment of the patient to put themselves first? How do you do that? And I think that's where the results based is what we're looking for. And part of our standard, and you do as well, is it's the labs, it's a POE metabolic testing, right? So getting baselines, and then when you can retest and show them they're actually getting results, that's pretty awesome, right? When they can say, okay, I went from what is my biological age, with POE testing to now I'm actually age reversing. Everybody wants longevity these days, and hyperbarics helps. Diet and lifestyle, and you're able to provide that, and that's something that normally the traditional system doesn't even touch on. So there is such great value of what you and my husband are doing, bringing hope and healing. And I will tell you that every person who probably walks through your doors and our doors, it feels like family. You're not walking through a traditional family practice where it's sterile and I mean, obviously we're a clean facility, but it feels like family. It's not uncommon for our patients to have a cup of coffee with us or put their lunch in our refrigerator and break bread with our team over the lunch hour if they're here, on an extended, period. They do become like family, and our patients love that. This is their wellness center. This is kind of like their country club of wellness. If they're here and they're putting in the reps,
Yeah.
they love that. They love that they know our team, they know their family history, and that's what it should feel like. It's a warm hug. So, I have one patient who just literally bought a hyperbaric chamber for home, and but he goes, Carrie, I just miss coming and getting a hug. So he comes in once a month, just for a hug, just to say, hey,
Yeah.
I'm putting in the reps, we're doing it, and and if we are their biggest cheerleader to give them affirmations and encouragement, then you know what, sometimes that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be a place of light and a beacon of light to bring them hope. And I know that you do that at your clinic as well.
Yeah. Well, we certainly strive to. And, going back to those early days, I find a little bit of beauty and gratitude in that struggle that no one handed this to me and to you. We worked, we figured it out, we earned everything we have, and now we're so blessed. We don't take it for granted that we have people to help with marketing or do the payroll for me, which was my first treat to myself. That stressed me out beyond belief because I didn't want to mess it up. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it's gratitude. We went through a lot of hard. We had to go. I now have 3 CPAs working on our company. You know, you have to have an incredible team who has different giftings. But I remember when you could only afford certain positions, right? And so but each one of those hard moments, while you had to army crawl through them at times, is what I would call it, right? Like I don't know how to, even just hanging a TV in a patient room or to like, different modalities like training. How am I going to get the money? And I pray, I'm like, okay, God, I just need to hit payroll this week, right?
yep.
And
I've had
and
that discussion a few times.
right, like, is it there? And but I'm grateful. I'm grateful because he always provided. And the reality is that now, after 3.5 years, of getting home late, becoming a general contractor, for the facility when we had to change a storage room into a Staiku body scan room. And I had to call the handyman. When we first started, I'll never forget, my husband had given a talk at a local church, and these ladies, they said, Carrie, your husband saved our life with ivermectin with COVID, and we're forever grateful.
Mhm.
And on that Thanksgiving, those ladies texted me. They said, we are able to sit at our Thanksgiving table because your husband saved our lives. And although, you know, there wasn't much money in the bank, I was grateful that their family could be with their loved ones. And that was worth it to me. But those ladies, um, those ladies also said, we don't know how to be a doctor, Carrie, but we can paint walls. And so these amazing farm church ladies from Esterville, Iowa, they came over and they helped me pick out the paint colors, and they would show up at 8 o'clock and they would paint our walls until 11:30. They said, we can volunteer and we can paint your walls. And so this has really become a community place where people have gathered, they have rallied, they have stood by our family in the process.
Yeah.
And those are those hope and holy stories that I will always cherish in my heart, where people do support you. They do. I will tell you that even now in this, time, people are now understanding, oh, we're looking for a facility like yours, Molly. They're looking for a facility like ours, where it's not working in the traditional system. They're not seeing results, and they're really inflamed, and they want answers. And so, Dr. Meyer does discovery calls, 15-minute calls, where patients can call and say, hey, is this a right fit for us? And so that's been really helpful. And sometimes, guess what? They're closer to you. You're right. Sometimes they're closer to a friend practitioner who is in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so it's really creating this new herd of physicians who are supportive and saying, hey, they're more specialized in this area in the integrative care. And I think that's really kind of one of the best blessings out of this too, is that we get to meet up at conferences, like we're going to see you next week in Dallas at the Ozone Conference, and some of our other friends. That has been a blessing, that we can all have our independent practices, and yet we still get to celebrate, and phone a friend to be like, hey, Molly, how do you do this, and get to share communications and what is working in your facility. It's recreating the new herd of practitioners, doing this together. Yeah, that's been a huge blessing.
Definitely. One of the things during my visit you introduced me to is really revolutionizing people's perception of the hyperbaric, and that's the brain gauge. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yes, I'm so excited about the brain gauge. So this amazing neuroscientist, Mark Tomberdahl. He's actually from North Carolina. Very amazing guy. So he created this device called the Brain Gauge. And what it can do is it can do a quick test in 90 seconds. So in 90 seconds, it can actually look at your brain. It's a little mouse pad that you can actually just touch with two fingers. It looks like a mouse, but it's actually like $100,000 device in a $650 brain gauge. The cool thing about it is that it can do a 15 to 20-minute test and look at all areas of the brain, all 5 areas of the brain, and see how you're actually working, which gives us a good picture of how you're functioning. And then he also has and we've been actually doing that before hyperbarics and after hyperbarics. We've been doing it before and after ozone therapy, before and after ISS therapy. And what it's doing is actually giving people a glimpse of how your brain is actually functioning and how it's actually healing. So without having to do an EEG, without having to go do a SPECT scan or an MRI, this gives us, and it's 45 years of academic research from North Carolina. It was actually federally funded for the Navy. And so it's pretty incredible. It's a device that you can have at your clinic, look at, where the patient's going and actually how they're healing. So it's another measurable thing. We talk about measurements. You have traditional blood tests, you have PNOE for metabolic health, and then you now have brain gauge that you can have at your clinic. The cool thing about it too is that there's a sector with the brain gauge is that you can do brain training. And that what the brain training does is that in between the sessions for 15 to 20 minutes a day, they just they work on different areas of the brain and how it can, accuracy, focus, your quick time response, which ones. So for your two fingers, it'll ask you which one came first, right? Or it'll say push the opposite of what vibrated the finger. Push the opposite button, and it times it. And my uncle, who was an F-16 pilot, Uncle Kip, he actually came in and he's like, "Oh, this is terrible." He's like, "I'm not an F-16," And so he's been doing the brain gauge, and now he's at like expert level. They have Olympian athletes doing it now. My kids, they get home from school, and they're like super competitive now with the brain gauge. So not only can you use it in your clinic, what I love is that you can actually bring the brain gauge home. And so, but from a clinical perspective, you as a practitioner can actually watch your patients putting in the reps, just like coming and getting hyperbarics at the clinic. You could actually watch them putting in the reps, doing the brain gauge, watching their brain heal and seeing the curves. If you look at the brain gauge's website, you can actually see we're actually doing case studies, and you can actually see our hyperbaric patients before and after hyperbarics and how their brain is actually improving with not only the hyperbarics but with the brain training in addition. So after they get out of the hyperbarics, we normally put them on the brain gauge for about 15 to 20 minutes to do the training, and then we do the testing, and the results are just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I want to pivot now for just a minute. So, with anything in medicine, eventually it becomes political. Whether that there's so many forces on each therapy. So, like IV vitamins, you've got training programs, you've got people who think they should do it, you've got other people who think they should do it, you've got the regulating bodies who don't want anyone to do it. Talk to me about the politics of the hyperbaric side of medicine because I'm starting to see this come to the surface. What have you seen with that? Hard chambers versus soft chambers. And we had this tragic event in Michigan where a young boy was in a hard chamber and there was an explosion. This has happened multiple times through history, but of course, being a pediatric patient got in the United States got a lot of attention. So, how are you seeing the politics seep into the good intentions of what we're trying to do to help people?
Yeah, my heart goes out to that family first and foremost. I mean, what a sad tragedy that was. I mean, just awful. Um, you know, for um, I really don't enjoy politics, but it is
Me
part of
either.
I don't.
Them.
I really just like to stay in the love and the light. And you know, what we have found is that a lot of people will want the higher pressures. That's not an area of my expertise. What we have found is that the lower pressure is what has worked with our patients, and that is where we have focused in. You know, there's some people who and I'm sure there's higher pressure that does help with people, but Brad and I we've just focused on the lower pressure, um, and that's where we're seeing the results, and that's probably where we will always stay. We will never be a high pressure clinic. It'll always be a lower pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And for patients listening, when I was looking, you guys taught me, about this. That's how I was introduced to it. And when you look at, because I was doing just market like what is the advantage of each one. And when you look at what it costs to put a hard chamber in and the safety requirements and the risk to patients, the soft chambers have such a lower point of entry, so we can make it accessible and cost effective for patients, and to me safer overall.
Yeah, the low pressure, even we've actually even found that even half of the 1.3 atmospheres, that's what we have at our clinic, that even just a little bit of pressure, even half of that 1.3, right, can actually still help the body heal. It's incredible.
Mhm.
And so, like, for instance, my daughter, during COVID, when they were trying to mask all the children in schools, she couldn't read lips when they had a mask, right? She couldn't read lips. And so she was having a hard time with her language. And
Mhm.
I went to her conferences, and her teacher's like, she's having a hard time with the lips. So I started putting her in the hyperbaric chamber with me 3 days a week before school, and it was just half pressure, half of the 1.3. And I went back 6 weeks later for her another review, and they're like, Carrie, what kind of um, what kind of therapy are you doing with Grace? And I said, I'm not. I'm just putting her in the hyperbaric chamber. It was helping her brain work, and isn't that amazing? But it was half of the 1.3 was all it took, and that was incredible. Just at the time, she was like 6. It was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of my favorite uses of the hyperbaric chamber in the little guys. Not that, but we have kiddos that are like 18 months that come in with a fever. Moms are saying, I've tried Tylenol, I've tried ibuprofen, I don't know what's wrong. They say it's a virus, but we're 104. I put them in the chamber for 60 minutes and the fever usually dissipates and doesn't come back.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. My kids, it's funny, my 2 boys, they were in the chamber last night together. Anyhow, he had a spelling test this morning, my Henry, and he's gonna smoke it, like, on the way to school today, he's like, "Mom, I'm on top of the world." He was spitting out those letters quick and fast. And it's like a hit, and my son Grant, he uses it for sports. He's a baseball player. He had some inflammation in his elbow, a little bit of overuse, probably just excited for the season. And you put a little ozone in his elbow and get him in the hyperbaric chamber, and he's back to new. So it's pretty incredible how quick, and it's nice to have at home. It's nice that we can put him in and have that accessibility, or share this with his friends here at the clinic. So yeah.
Wonderful. Where can people follow you? Where can they find you? How can they support your clinic if they're in your area or want to travel in?
Yeah, so we are in Okoboji, Iowa, in Spirit Lake. They can call our clinic at 712-339-6024. Make an appointment with Dr. Meyer, or you can find us at the Okoboji Wellness Clinic.com. You can see we've got some resources in regards to the chambers, all the different services that we have. It would be our pleasure and honor to bring you guys hope and healing. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And such good people. You can tell it's just good vibes all around, good place to be. What would be your final piece of advice to somebody out there who's struggling, they've spent a lot of money invested in their health and they're just not getting those results and they're just about to give up? What would you recommend for them?
Make a call, do a discovery call. Let us be a beacon of hope and light for you. And it is worth the climb. It is worth saying it's happening. Healing is happening, and that you can expect miracles. And the reality is, there is hope, and that is our greatest aspect is lean in, put on the oxygen mask on yourself, take care of yourself, because you are the greatest asset to your family, and you are worthy, and you are worthy. Um, and you are loved. And that's it. You are absolutely loved. And it is our honor and our pleasure get to bring you guys hope.
Yeah, I love that. You are the greatest asset to the people in your life. That is beautiful, and it's so poignant because no individual is replaceable.
No, they're not. And the reality is, it is worth saying yes to one more patient. And so sometimes when the days were long, it is worth one more patient, to find that person who needs hope. And so that is why we have extended hours. That's why we're willing to do anything, because the reality is we treat you like family. And what I would do for somebody else's family member, I do for yourself. And it's an honor to get to serve. Some people do mission work overseas. I get to do mission work every single day. And, you know, we don't, it's hard to get us home in the evening sometimes, because we're just sitting here on a high, getting to bring so many hope and so many wins. And that is, we don't go to work. We just we get to come here to serve. And that is such a blessing. Yeah.
Very good. Carrie Meyer, it's been an honor talking with you. Thank you for sharing your time with us and your talents, and we'll bring you back for updates in the future.
Sounds
So
good.
thanks so
Be
much.
well, everybody.
Yep. And thanks for tuning in. Check out next time another episode of the Dr. Mollie James Show.